The new Abyss for Natlan just came out, so let us take a look to see what you can do to get an easy 36 stars. So quick thoughts on it, I've already cleared it and I've gotten 36 stars, and I can definitely say that this Abyss is definitely much easier than the last ones since there is no elemental check. It's overall a DPS check, so as long as you have two teams that meet the requirement, you should be able to clear it and possibly get 36 stars just as easy. The current blessing buffs normal attack, so any normal attack DPS characters like Alucino, Yoimiya, Noelle, and of course Morlani will benefit greatly from this buff. Now let us start off with Floor 11. So Floor 11 has a 60% Dendro and Hydro damage bonus, so try to run Hydro or Dendro characters in order to make your clears much easier. For this floor, Hyper Bloom is particularly good. So we start off with Chamber 1, you're gonna have a bunch of the Saurian boys from all three tribes. The range units will always focus on the tower, so you can try to hit them first, and also the melee units will also like default their aggro with the tower. You can hit the melee units to draw their aggro, but the range units will always be focused on the tower, so try to focus them first. Generally, there is no easy way out of this one. You just need to have enough DPS or use groupers like Kazuha, Venti, or Sucrose to make life easy. If you don't have any of these units and you only have Sucrose, you can try to use the game's auto-targeting system to position her burst right on the tower for a very consistent grouping. Otherwise, it's very much a DPS check, so if you have a team that has a relatively high DPS, it should be quite easy for you to keep the tower alive above 60%. For the second half, we have two waves of singular Ring Guard. It's pretty straightforward, just do enough damage to aggro them, pull them away from the tower once they do, and then just kill them, and we move on to the second chamber. So for the second chamber on the first half, we have a bunch of Spectres which spawns in the order of Electro, Anemo, and then Geo. These Spectres will spawn one by one after the previous one has died, and they spawn in a clockwise rotation, so be sure to keep that in mind. After you clear all the Spectres, we have 3 Fungus Boys followed by 3 of the Yamkusos. There's not really anything noteworthy about them, just do enough damage, kill them, and then we move on to the second half. For the second half, we have the Mirror Maiden. You can use certain groupers or anyone that can do a bit CC like Kazuha or Jin before she marks you with her mirror state, thus becoming unstunnable. Otherwise, she's pretty straightforward, just do enough damage, kill her, and then we move on to the next enemy. One notable thing is that whenever she teleports, she will always go behind wherever she was, so try to keep that in mind for any of you melee or circle impact users. The second enemy is the Consecrated Crocodile. There's nothing big about him, he just has really high Hydro res and generally above average resistance, so just kill him and we move on to the next chamber. The one thing I would say is that when it does this specific move, it will spawn a Hydro block afterwards, so try to hit it with elemental attacks, preferably Hydro, in order to obtain the block, and then hit the crocodile once you do in order to do big damage and stun him for about 10 seconds. When he is stunned, he would generally have reduced resistance, so if your team's damage is not high enough, try to use this mechanic to your advantage. Now for chamber 3, the first wave, we're gonna have a Dendro and a 2 Geo Natlan elites. Focus on the Dendro ones since the other 2 melee boys will go after you. After you take care of this wave, we have 2 avatars of lava and they are always pyro infused, so reactions like vaporize and melt is relatively easy to trigger here. Otherwise, it is pretty straightforward, just try to do enough damage and then we move on to the second half. For the second half, we have the budget Morlani local legend. There is really nothing of note about her, so just do enough damage and make sure you meet the 7-minute timer, and there you go, and you have your 9 stars.
影を刈り尽くす
風の
知れ
雲の
ブレッドレイン
はっはっそこだ
影のカラス覚え
Now, let's move on to Float Off. So for the first half, we have 2 Nobushis and Kairagis, so try to go for the Nobushis since they are much squishier than the Kairagi, and the Kairagi will always go after you regardless. After you take care of this wave, we have the Pyro Gunner and the Cryo Gunner local legend. The Pyro Gunner will always activate its Pyro shield, so try to bring Hydro and Pyro to make your life easy. In order to kind of group them together, try to face the Pyro Gunner like point blank face and try to make it so that he actually backsteps towards the Cryo Gunner, so you don't really have to do any sort of grouping. You don't necessarily have to use a Pyro character here if you can use a Nemo in order to infuse Pyro so that you can easily break the Cryo Gunner shield. This includes abilities like Venti, Kazuha Burst, and of course Sucrose Burst. If you are going to be targeting the Cryo Gunner legend first, bear in mind that it will leave behind a Cryo field that will do a lot of damage for about 5 to 10 seconds, so try to stay clear of that and try not to die. Otherwise, you could try to kill them both at the same time or try to focus on killing the Pyro Gunner first because upon death, he will only buff his teammate's attack, which will make the Cryo Gunner a bit more lethal, but I think it should be quite doable. For the second half, we have the singular flying robot. If you do have any bow characters, you can shoot its 2 weak points in order to bring it down, but otherwise it's not necessarily needed since you can still hit him on the ground regardless. Afterwards, we have the Scorpion Eremite Lady. Just do enough damage, wait for her to spawn the Scorpion, try to prioritize the Scorpion in order to do big damage and stun her, and then after that we go to the next enemy. So afterwards, we do have the range Eidolon legend. The only moves that he really has is a laser move and a can't move, which is relatively ranged and very easy to dodge if you can just circle around him. The only melee attack he has is the expansion attack, and because it's his only melee move, it will do quite a good amount of damage to you, so just try to be wary when he starts expanding. Otherwise, straightforward, kill it, and we move on to Chamber 2. For the first half, we have the 3 fungus boys, just kill them, nothing special.
みんなは俺が守る風の行く先を
And after you get them, we will have the Jade Chicken Mushroom boss. It's pretty straightforward, it doesn't really matter what you do, there's no real strategy. You can use electro characters on this half to build up a bar, and eventually like he'll do a special move which will put him stun, which he will have negative resistance when he is in that state. But you can use any other team, preferably try not to use a Dendro team because he does have relatively high Dendro resistance. Then we move on to the second half. So the second half, we have 1 Wind Husk Serpent Knight. Ideally, try not to use a shield unit because whenever he hits you with that, he will shortly teleport and gain a bit of iframes, but otherwise just do whatever and kill him. And afterwards, we do have the Mago Kenki. So try to save your elemental burst for the second phase, and this can be noted when his health is roughly at the S letter of the Swords Master part. Afterwards, he will teleport in 1 to 2 moves if you are relatively close to him, so try to save your abilities, especially if you're using any circle impact characters. And then after he teleports away, he will do a singular slash, and if you are near him, he will teleport at the complete opposite of you if you are near. Of course, this is completely RNG, but his pattern is generally fixed, so even if he doesn't do it immediately, he will do it in like after 1 or 2 moves. Otherwise, it's pretty straightforward. Just kill him and we'll move on to Chamber 3. So for the first half, we have the new boss, the one and only Big Chongus. So there's nothing really special about him except for a few things to keep note. So try to be wary when he does his triple laser attack, because I have had to retry twice because his laser attack one-shotted my 19k health Kazuha. The only mechanic of note is that he will eventually spit out 3 of these explosive fruits that you've seen in Natlan before. Try to hit all 3 of them with Pyro in order to make them explode, and if all 3 of them explode, it will stagger him for a relatively decent amount of time. Try to watch the grounds because when the fruit explodes, it will leave a trail that will actually do damage over time. So try to be careful because I think my Arlecchino like died at one time, and that's the reason why I had to do a second retry. Another thing of note is that if you do play circle impact teams, he does have one move where he spins away to the other side of the map, so try to keep that in mind. And otherwise, we'll move on to the second half. So the second half, we have the PMA. He's pretty straightforward. One thing I can say is that if you want to do your rotations early, try to keep your distance in the first few seconds if you don't want him to fly up at the very first move. The only other thing I can give advice on is during his weakening phase. So when he enters his phase, there are 4 possible rune max that you might get, and this is completely RNG. If you get the crab, what you can do is that you can try to hug the PMA or stay relatively far away in order to bait his jump attack so that he can come closer to you and make grouping easier. If you're facing the best one, aka the Dorito, try to face him in a way so that he will lunge back towards the PMA, which will make your killing much easier. Then the next one, we do have the snake. Generally, you want to stay in between him and the PMA, but not within the range of his ring so that you can bait his digging attack. And after he starts digging, try to reposition yourself next to the PMA and then set up your rotation afterwards. If you're extremely unlucky and you get the jellyfish, you're gonna have to wait for him to kind of spawn up and come to you. So there's really no strategy about him. Just wait for him to spawn, or if you don't want to bother retrying, if you're good on time, it doesn't really matter. And otherwise, that is your 36 stars. So I hope the guide helps, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace!